Hey everyone, it's Anthony from Pretty Printer here. In today's video, I'll be talking about the Init app method, and this method is used with extensions in Flask. So I'm going to demonstrate using Flask SQL Alchemy, but every extension that you use in Flask should have an Init app method. And instead of explaining it, I'll just start writing code so you can see what I mean. So what I'll do here is I'll create a second file called models.py. The first file that you saw was my app.py file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to import Flask SQL Alchemy. So this is an extension. It can be any extension, but Flask SQL Alchemy is the one I am going to demonstrate with. So if you've used Flask SQL Alchemy, you know that you have to instantiate the SQL Alchemy object. So SQL Alchemy. And usually you pass along the app. But in this case, because I'm not using this method, I'm going to use init app instead. I don't get to pass the app to SQL Alchemy. So I just get the DB without having passed the app. So the reason why I pass the app in most cases is because the configuration depends on the application's configuration. So this URI is where my database is located, but I'm going to create one model here without having access to the URI, and we'll see what happens. So what I'll do is I'll create a class. I'll call this user. It's going to inherit db.model. So everything here, if you're familiar with Flask SQL Alchemy, is going to be the same. So db column, db integer, and then the primary key is going to be true. And then I'll just have a name for this. So db column, db string, and let's say 50 characters. Okay, so now that I have this, if you look closely at this, what you'll see is that because it doesn't depend on the app, it becomes completely generic. So I could use this same models file in any application, any Flask app that I have, or anyone can take this and use it in theirs because it does not depend on the app itself. This is kind of standalone. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this standalone code and then add it into my app using init app. So if I go back to my app file, what I'm going to do is I'm going to import from models. So from models, import DB and user. So now that I have DB, I can go ahead and instantiate the app on that, or init the app. So db.init app, and I'll pass in the app, just like that. So this is different from what you're probably used to seeing in my videos. And that's because it doesn't bound the app to the instantiation of the database object. Instead, it kind of just adds the app onto the database after the fact. So this is going to change how things work in certain parts of the extension, but everything else will work exactly the same. But the main advantage of this is this becomes completely independent of anything in my app. So even though it has the database URI here, the actual model itself is independent. So if I were to go and let me start up Python. So if you're familiar with Flask SQL Alchemy, you know that I would do something like this. So from app import DB, and then I would DB create all. But I get an error. It's telling me basically that no application is found. And that's because I didn't create the database using the app at the beginning. I didn't use db equals SQL Alchemy passing in the app. Instead, I'm using init app. So this no longer works. I can no longer use this outside of an actual application context because it doesn't know what the application context is. And basically what I mean by application context is something that is Flask related. So like a route. So if I create a route here and I call this create, I can do db create all here. So I'll do something like db create all and return all tables created. So the reason why this works here is because when I run this, the app would have already been added to the DB. And now when I call DB, it knows what the configuration for the table is, and I can create all the tables. But when I don't do that, it's basically like trying to import this file alone. So ignoring app, but importing models by itself and trying to create all. It won't work because it doesn't know what the database table is, or the database is because I don't have the database URI. So now if I run the app, so Python app, and then I go to create. So That's my index. Create. It tells me all tables created. So then if I open up SQLite with my database and look at the tables, I see a user table. So I can do this inside of Flask, but outside of Flask, it becomes a little more difficult. But it's usually not a problem because normally you want your applications to be running with Flask. There are other ways to allow the application context to be determined when you're not actually running a Flask app, but I'm not going to cover that in this video. But every extension that you come across in Flask, when you instantiate it, instead of instantiating it in the way where you pass the app directly to the object, instead you can use init app. So every single extension will have this init app method that is available for you to use. So the reason why I'm making this video is because in the next video I make, I'm going to cover a pattern for this called application factories, and you'll see how this comes into play. So by itself, it doesn't really make that much sense, but when I add it to something else, things will make a little more sense. So that's the first part. In the second part, I'll cover how to use application factories, and the app factories are going to include things like blueprints, so you can see how the code gets organized, and you'll see the advantages more clearly of using this method. So that's it for this video. If you have any questions about it, you can leave a comment down below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe. So thank you for watching, and I will talk to you next time.